my key purchasing requirements after coming off Wards Hill Road at Kilcare Heights were not to be able to see another house, the road or a car. And that's what I bought. We look over to a neighbour's paddock, and then we've got reserve on two sides. And, you drive up the driveway and you just sort of breathe and relax, and it's our oasis. And that's, a lot of people just absolutely love that aspect. And other people will want street frontage, they want presence. So it really determines what their requirements are, where they're coming from, and then also where their budget dictates which things are the important things, which things that are vital and which they have to do without to fit into that price point. But the privacy is a key thing. It's a key thing.
Welcome back to the Unreal Estate podcast. Today we're thrilled to welcome Ingrid Medlicott from Gittoes Real Estate. How are you, Ingrid?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're super excited. We're going to talk about lots of things, your journey and a bit about what you're doing and lots of other topics. So welcome and tell us a little bit about your story, I guess, how you kind of got into real estate, how long you've been doing this and, where you kind of operate.
I've been in real estate for nearly 15 years. I got into real estate. I've always had an interest. I bought my first property when I was 21 and an investment, like to live in, and an investment property actually before that. But when we moved to Acres, the agent that we bought through had said, I think you'd be great in real estate. Would you like to come and work for me? And that was how it started.
Really? Because you lived at Matcham for many years.
I still live at Matcham.
Oh, you're still at Matcham?
So I've been at Matcham for 15 years this month. No, I was in Kilcare before that.
So we crossed paths many years ago first, didn't we, when I was sales agent as well?
Yes.
And we were often, out in the Matcham Valley.
Yep.
Up against each other back in those days.
Also back when there was co-lists were a done thing.
Yeah.
Back then.
Yeah. I think we did that a few times.
Yeah. Was one on Wattle Tree Road.
Yeah, we did, yeah. So it's really nice to be here today and kind of have a bit more of a chat to you about how far you've come. And particularly in Matcham, Holgate, that's probably where you concentrate mostly these days, isn't it?
That's my core area. And then I have got fringe areas from there. So predominantly selling acreage properties, which are, it's a lifestyle. Yeah. And so Matcham and Holgate, and then the fringes like Mount Elliott, Erina Valley, Pickett's Valley, Lisaroa, Rimba, Fountaindale, Wombrel, we've got one coming up over there. So they're the areas that I mostly sell in, because when people are searching for a lifestyle, it's not necessarily suburb driven, it's property driven. It's their needs and lifestyle requirements that will, ultimately determine where they end up.
What are some of the, I guess, particular things people are looking for in relation to lifestyle when they start considering acreage properties?
Firstly, it depends on their situation with their family, in terms of what their needs are, whether they require a pool, whether they require level land, whether they require sheds and lots of storage. Funnily enough, we have a category in our system called shed, because the number of people that have multiple cars and toys is growing. So they're key things, level land, the swimming pool, generally having a great integration between your internal and external living is a thing, but people want that to flow. Home offices is a key thing, and separate living spaces. Gone are the days where the whole family sat and watched
congregates,
a one TV. Houses now have 3 and 4 TVs, so multiple living spaces that are quite separate.
Privacy is it still a massive thing? I remember, not being able to see a neighbour. It was very important when I was in that space.
Yeah. So privacy and outlook. So some people are more concerned about having a level parcel, but then sometimes a level parcel doesn't drain so well. Whereas when you get outlook, you get perspective, and that's really special. So when I moved to Acres, my key purchasing requirements after coming off Wards Hill Road at Kilcare Heights were not to be able to see another house, the road or a car. And that's what I bought. We look over to a neighbour's paddock, and then we've got reserve on two sides. And that's what it's like. You drive up the driveway and you just sort of breathe and relax, and it's our oasis. And that's, a lot of people just absolutely love that aspect. And other people will want street frontage. They want presence. So it really determines what their requirements are, where they're coming from, and then also where their budget dictates which things are the important things, which things that are vital and which they have to do without to fit into that price point. But the privacy is a key thing. It's a key thing. And, not necessarily having neighbours close to them or overlooking their living spaces.
Yeah. So it's quite different buying a residential property than buying an acreage. There's
Absolutely.
Obviously, land is king. Always
Absolutely.
is. I'll never forget when I first got into selling real estate. In that, I went sort of straight into that acreage space, kind of fell into it. But land is king, 100%. Aspect is king. But what are some of the important factors or red flags or things that you feel, if you're out there looking for acreage, that you should really be looking out for?
I guess looking at any nearby development. I mean, subdivision is pretty much a thing of the past with our semi-rural properties. The minimum lot size under the new statewide LEP is actually increasing, so that is an unlikely thing that's going to happen. There are a few parcels in our area that are subdivided, but they're actually still being held. One of the key concerns when people come onto acreage is they've got this thing about battle axe, shared driveways and things like that. For some people, it's an absolute deal breaker, and others are, it's not a thing, just depending on where they've come from. And so on a residential, people on a battle axe, it's always considered secondary real estate. Whereas on an acreage, if you're on a battle axe, well, that's the bee's knees. But then it also depends on whether the driveway is on your title, whether it's a shared access or an easement, that sort of thing. So those are the sorts of things that do concern some people. I sort of think that if you're in a little enclave and that takes you off the street and you've got a shared driveway, you've got 4 other people to share the cost of repairing a bit of bitumen or concrete.
Because they're not cheap driveways. If you have to redo one on an acreage, you're looking at major cost.
Yep.
Because they're not short.
They're not. Mine's 300 metres long.
See, you need to do that, and that's a lot of money.
That's right. So the infrastructure are the things that are more important, that are things that people should consider. So the amount of fencing that a property has, I mean, people don't necessarily need their whole boundaries fenced, but if they do need to do that for whether it be for pets or children and things or privacy, that is a considerable expense. I had a client do a 110-metre boundary just a few weeks ago. You know the property, you've been there. On Oak Road, we've had to sort of work out different strategies to relaunch that property, and that 110 metres costs just over $10,000 for a triple rail and post and rail fence.
It's a big consideration, isn't it?
Yeah. So you think about it, that's for a whole property, you're bordering on $50,000 to do a 2.5 acre. Yeah. That's a lot of money. The quality of the water tanks, whether they are concrete, whether they're steel, whether they're poly, there's a difference between the life of them and also the quality and longevity of the water. People are now getting really concerned about filtration systems. 15 years ago, it wasn't
even talked about.
There wasn't even a filter.
We never talked about that at the time with water tanks. What was talked about is, because it was in the drought, do we have to buy water?
Yeah.
What's our capacity? And clients back then were having to truck in water.
They were. It was a thing. It was in some of them were on like a subscription that it would happen every however long.
It's also an education part. Like, that's one of the first questions a lot of people say, is it on town water? And I'll say no, but it's a rare thing to be on town water on acreage. Your average family of 4 without a swimming pool will use, if you're careful, about 2,000 litres of water a week. So we have very good coastal rainfall in the semi-rural areas. We're all quite close to the coast. And most of the acreage properties, they've got large single-level homes, so you've got a great roof span. So you are collecting good water quantities. So my rule of thumb is your minimum that you want to have is about 55,000 litres, and the gold standard is 107,000 litres, your 20,000 gallon tank. Yeah. So if you've got that, that is your own reservoir. And a lot of the time it's just educating people about what your requirements are and what your needs are. And look, if it has only got 2 5,000 gallon tanks, which is 22,700 litres, and you do run out, well, this water will pop over for $165. It's not a big deal, but you can easily put in additional tanks quite cost effectively. And now UV filtration is becoming a thing that people, are quite keen to have. It's a good selling point. Other things that people are getting more aware about is understanding the on-site septic systems. I have had a purchaser in the last week, besides pest and building, they had the pool equipment checked for longevity, for how long it's going to be until they need to replace various pieces of equipment. They had the whole septic system checked as well. And another one had a full geotech. They had a sun plan done. They had core drill samples, all sorts of things, because they are being careful about future expenditures and what they've got a budget for. So those sorts of things are becoming, things that people are getting more educated about that they should look into.
It's really great information for anyone that's out there looking for an acreage. And I always used to understand, and I guess it's people understanding they are future-proofing themselves against costs, because when you're talking about an acreage, the costs are always so much more than residential because they're on a larger scale. So whatever you have to do, it's going to be a lot more. Even maintenance. Often people would buy acres and sell them a couple of years down the track because they're like, whoa, I didn't understand what went into maintaining it. So it's just that everything's on a big scale, isn't it? It's like the fence.
We even find that with some of the inquiries we get about acreage property, and it's, city slickers coming up, they want a change of lifestyle. And we start the conversation about, what type of property they want and what they could expect. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've got to do work. And it's like, well, yeah,
I was
does
just
look after
come up
itself
on the weekends.
Yeah. And it's like, well, what's going to happen between the weekend? And they're like, oh, didn't actually consider that. So a lot of what we do is educating. Is an acreage the right property for you? My own family, one of those people, I'm like, guys, you've never been on an acreage before, but these are the considerations. And they're like, oh, maybe we're not at that stage yet. We thought we were, but maybe we're not there yet. Another interesting trend that we are seeing with acreage buyers, multi-generational living.
Oh, huge.
Are you seeing that too?
Yeah. Isn't that becoming
It is.
pooling the money?
Yeah.
And
we have a category for that in the system as well. Besides shed, tennis courts, dual occupancy.
do people want tennis courts anymore?
They still do. I've never actually sold a property to someone with a tennis court that wanted the tennis court, but I've got people in my system now looking for property either with a tennis court or the ability to put one in.
Correct.
It used to be a thing.
So sorry, we went off the track.
But they use them for other
multi-generational
things.
living.
They use them for other things: scootering, basketball. Pickleball.
So the multi-generational living, very interesting trend, isn't it? How much of that are you seeing?
Probably about 25% to 30%. And the thing is, though, is that and it's really tricky because you'll have one part of the equation, really keen on a property, and then the other side, no, it's a deal breaker. And so it's really difficult for them to come to terms with what it's going to be about, how it's going to work. And I had a property recently which we will be bringing back to market, and until that property, I could never have foreseen how many different scenarios that people could or would.
Is that the one I saw?
Yeah.
We had we were helping.
So
it
you had a triple.
We had a triple. But yeah, that was quite a complex arrangement as well.
And that was actually very close, that property for them. It was very close for a number of reasons. They didn't move forward, but we were very close on that. But we more and more are seeing with our acreage buyers, particularly, that there's some sort of multi-generational
There is
living
requirements.
requirement.
It's coming down to costs. That if people can pool together, it's going to give them a better lifestyle.
Yeah.
But also just in terms of the way people live. So you know how when you learn about Japan, you knew that phrase. It takes a whole community to raise a child, and so with the cost of childcare, so many more grandparents are involved in the looking after of their grandchildren. So if they're living on site, it makes it a lot easier. The flip side is there's a lot of people like our age don't want to see their parents in a village or in nursing homes and things like that. So they're future-proofing their parents' lifestyle.
That's 100% as well what we're seeing. Also looking at the care that's involved. So they want to be involved. They just don't want to put their elderly in a home and somewhere where, and like thinking about the logistics of getting there all the time and, delivering supplies and all those sorts of things where it's more feasible to have them still at home for longer. They're still very much involved. It preserves their life in a lot of ways. But also too, there's people that move here for lifestyle out of the city. They still have to commute. So, childcare, getting into childcare centres, as we all know, it's typically a 2-year wait. So then it opens a conversation. Well, we're prepared to help you, but we don't want to be up at 6 a.m. commuting, to get there in time. So they're definitely important factors that we are seeing as well with our clients.
No, I think that's been some really great helpful information for people, because we do have a lot of people listen that are buyers, obviously, but also sellers and other people that are just interested in property in general. So, I think you've added some really great points to the acreage market.
I think the one other thing, and I always laugh when I see the inquiries come through from someone new that we haven't dealt with before, and it says, like you tick the boxes, why, and it's like investor. And I get on the phone and I'm like, you do realise an acreage property is not an investment, like in terms of rental return, because
very poor performance
because the value that's in the land, they don't understand it's the land, it's the appreciating asset, not the home. And it requires a lot of maintenance.
And the buy-in is just too expensive.
So much
the rent you will never keep up. It's just, it's not a great investment.
No. Unless there's an immediate improvement for them, or it's got some dual occupancy. One we sold a couple of years ago was detached dual occupancy, and they've completely renovated the cottage. So they're doing quite well. And then there's another property that I appraised for a client just recently, and they've renovated the whole entire home and just pretty much completely redone the whole studio. They're doing very, very well on Airbnb with that, and they may release it, and they will make $1 million on that in a very short period of time.
So it's capital growth focused, if anything, not yield. It's not a strong performer in your yield. You're never going to get that return.
There are a certain amount of Airbnbs out there on the acreage side of things, but you couldn't be highly leveraged to make the dollars work. And from my understanding with one of the businesses that I do work closely with in that sector, the rates aren't what they were a few years ago.
No.
And it'll probably come back because post-COVID, people are travelling overseas. There's less people to go domestically, and so of course it's bringing the pricing back because of course they're competing with the hotels.
We've seen that in few of the other holiday areas on the Central Coast where people were buying weekenders and doing, great numbers on Airbnb, and it's dropped off now, and they're kind of offloading some of those properties, or their expectation of income is they're just, look, we'll cover our land tax and we'll cover our costs, but maybe we won't be doing what we were doing then.
To a number of these properties that they did purchase as, Airbnb or holiday homes during COVID, they're realising that was a totally different dynamic back then, but they probably weren't the best properties to be equipped for that function. They weren't really the right setup, but given the environment we were living in, like everything, just, it was kind of like the blinkers were on. It's like this will do, or this is what I can afford, so let's just do it. But now times have changed and people are realising different things are important. People are much more sensitive. It's got to have the right setup or it just doesn't work.
Tell us a little bit about your experience with buyer's agents, I guess, too. Buyer's agents, they're reasonably new to the Central Coast area. How many do you work with? How do you find the experience? Where do you sort of see the benefits are for buyers and potentially sellers? We'd love to hear your perspective on how you see that sort of trend growing or benefiting those transacting real estate.
So primarily I deal with 3 buyer's agents on the Central Coast. I have also dealt with a couple from Sydney, but not regularly. I did sell one to a client from a Sydney buyer's agent. He did operate fairly differently to our buyer's agents on the Central Coast. Very different attitude. But generally speaking, our relationships with buyer's agents are really, really positive. 15 years ago, I think there was one buyer's agent on the Central Coast. And the perception back then was that they saved you money, they negotiated for you. And that isn't what it's all about anymore. Like I have seen some purchases through buyer's agents and the buyer's agent knows like we are paying a premium here, but it's taken us this many months or years to find the exact property. And if that's the property that these people are going to hold for 20 years, does another 50 grand, does it really matter? Probably not on the scale of the thing. So what we find now is that our buyer's agents are saving clients time in terms of being able to inspect properties if they're working or they're Sydney-based. But the key thing is the time they have to get into off-market properties, pre-market opportunities for their clients. And so when we see in our socials, frequently a lot of the purchases through a buyer's agent are pre-market. And that is a really big value add. And also, I think getting, like what you were talking about when, Linda, when they're saying, I want this and I'm going to do that. If I had $1 for every time someone said, I want to do veggie gardens and I want to do chickens and all these sorts of things, and you go back to the property the next year and they haven't even done cobwebs. Like there's so much. It's amazing.
It's true though.
It is true.
Yeah,
so
true.
true.
There's a lot to do on an acreage.
Yeah. So it's like it's getting to the truth of what is a realistic purchase for them in terms of their capabilities and what is going to meet their needs, and helping them understand that. I looked at 48 properties before I bought the one I bought. Luckily, we liked the outlook because we didn't keep the house. It wasn't a cost-effective renovation, so we did a rebuild. But it was all about the outlook and the privacy, the road, the car business, that sort of thing. So I think with a buyer's agent, yes, they're negotiating and guiding you, but it's getting to the truth and understanding of what your needs really are, and helping you understand them yourself. Yeah. And then accessing properties pre-market. And managing agents, because it's like the industry has become more professional since I've been in it. The standards are higher in terms of, barriers to entry. But, there still are, that element out there that operate differently to perhaps say how I would operate. And sometimes people don't have the capacity to manage a real estate agent, or they don't understand that process or how it works, and so the buyer's agent is guiding them through that process. So there's multiple things there, but I think the key thing is that the time and the pre-market opportunities
was one of the things when we did our due diligence before we started our business. We asked ourselves a lot of questions about the industry, and obviously we were selling agents for a long time and in other areas of real estate before we did this. But who is going to want to, but still such a small number of people using a buyer's agent, how much growth's in the industry, where's it going? And we asked ourselves, who what are the main reasons that people are going to use a buyer's agent? And one of the major factors is time. We had on a previous episode, one of our past clients come in and he very rightly put it, what's the value of your time? And I think people are getting more in tune with the value of their own time.
Absolutely.
And where they are best spending that time, whether it be at work or with family or whatever it might be, and not spending weeks and months searching for property that potentially probably doesn't even suit them.
Or something that doesn't exist in their price point.
Yeah, that's another one that's probably one of the biggest parts of our job is to...
Education.
Yeah, what you're doing on your selling side, we're doing the same thing, prepping the buyer to be ready. And you're doing the same thing. If expectation might be a little bit out of, reality, you're doing the same thing.
With acreage properties as well, it's not like buying a residential property. And a lot of buyers don't understand that. So much of the journey initially, particularly if it's their first acreage purchase, is educating them on about all the nuances, the things to consider, how an acreage works. There's so many elements, and that's a learned skill over years and years of practice and transacting property, because it's changed. Like we were just talking about the water situation. Back when we all started in real estate, it's very different to what it is now. So it's been keeping abreast of all of that and, setting them up for success so they can decide, is acreage really for us? Or is perhaps we should consider a different type of residential property. So, we find that a lot with our education piece, as well as understanding price. Price guides are very different. And as you say, many selling agents operate differently in relation to price. So it's helping understand, because one acreage isn't necessarily the same as another.
They're very different. I mean, we've watched your journey and, your market share in Matcham Valley, which is, well done. We see the solds and we see That's been a long game. It doesn't happen in 5 minutes. Share a little bit about that. And we also love seeing other women in business do amazing things. So we're quite passionate about that. Women in real estate, it's changed a lot, hasn't it, over the past 15 years?
Absolutely. I think I sort of had to think about that before we came. And yes, it's a male-dominated industry. And I think, 15, 20 years ago, it was something you fell into. It was something that just suited your family dynamics at the time rather than it being a career choice. Like, I have a university education, I've got a sales and marketing background, I've had my own business, and, this real estate agent says, would you like to come and work for me? And at that time, had just moved back from overseas and, had a 2-year-old. And when you start refolding your tea towels again, because they're not good enough, you realise you need to start challenging yourself. And I'd always had a keen interest in property, and it was something I went into. And my mum was always like, oh, you've got a university degree and you're selling real estate. Like, she didn't see it as a career. But I think, down the track, I think she respects it more now because it's been a very flexible, it's hard work, it's long hours, it's intense, it can be very stressful. And the emotional
roller coaster
with your clients' journeys as well, because they're mostly in the sorts of properties I sell. There's a huge backstory.
Just on that emotional roller coaster ride, we were talking about this in another episode. Sometimes the conversations are not pleasant because you're delivering information they aren't prepared for, or B, they don't really want to hear, and so it takes you down a path, and we cop the brunt of it, even though it's not related to us at all. We're the messenger, essentially, until they go away and then digest that information, and they come back, and it just builds even more trust.
Yeah.
And then, it changes the whole dynamic of the relationship then moving forward.
It's not just those conversations. So my clients are generally, someone's died, someone's very, very ill, they've stayed on acres too long, or they're getting divorced. And there's a lot of family matters that I deal with. And so having a normal sale is usually a bit on the unusual side. So usually, and also if they're older, they might have been there for 20, 30 years. Like, the average move in Australia is 7 years. Well, the one we just sold this week in Matcham, they've been there for 38 years.
That's Acreage, isn't it?
That's
People love the lifestyle, and they stay.
They do.
They stay a long time, and it's a big decision to move.
So there's a lot of hand-holding, and like, I'm sort of putting together my own tools because I spend a lot of time explaining these things to them, and sometimes there's a lot of repetition in going through things again about the process and all that sort of thing. So you've got to spend a lot more time with them, and I think that's something that I always get complimented on, is that I take the time and I care enough to go through the process and guide them and explain how everything's going to work.
Do you think that women and the empathy that perhaps women have, sometimes a bit more than the male approach that's one of the keys to women doing so well in real estate these days? That understanding of that more nurturing side, do you think?
I think so. Sometimes people will prefer to deal with a woman because maybe that stereotype of a brash male agent. Yeah, women do tend to be softer and have more empathy. Not all women are like that, and everybody operates differently, of course. But generally speaking, a lot of people will gravitate towards, if you're a part of a team, I was part of a male-female team, they will quite often gravitate towards a woman. But, I did lose a listing recently because it was all about the bloke. It was a definite man situation. So, and that's just, it is what it is. But so the industry was, something that we fell into. Whereas my beautiful assistant Georgia, and I say beautiful, not just beautiful.
She is beautiful.
So sweet. She's so sweet. She wanted to be a real estate agent from when she was in high school. She did it for work experience, and she finished school, and she has been in real estate. And she's now, I'm her third boss, and there's been one in Sydney, and then when they moved up here, 2 very different workplaces, heavily male dominated. I thought her level of knowledge was perhaps deeper than it is, but she hadn't had that nurturing. And so she's really, really developing her skill set. So when she's 22 and And as she gets older, she's really going to have a great opportunity. And that's really cool because I'm trying to give her what I didn't have to start with. But it's really lovely that young women are deciding that this is a skill set. I mean, it's not rocket science. We work very hard. What I absolutely love is meeting different people and finding out what makes them tick, what they do, why they do it, and of course the beautiful fur babies.
Yeah. And I think, she's got an amazing role model in real estate to learn from. And
thank you.
Oh, no, she does. And one of the particular skills that I've noticed, working with you and looking at your properties is your amazing ability to look at a property and look at what might be a little bit of an imperfection, how they could improve it for sale. Mm-hmm. So, the recent property we just looked at with you, incorporating a separate, wardrobe area that would really suit a master suite, looking at a number of other properties, changing the configuration so it would suit a greater buyer pool. And I think that's actually a really unique quality because lots of selling agents go in and go, oh yeah, give her a paint, put some new flooring, but you look beyond that.
Absolutely.
You look at, okay, what could we easily or relatively easily, how can we prepare this property to, get to its full potential and attract a bigger buyer pool?
Absolutely, because the family home, the family property is your greatest ever tax-free asset. You've got one opportunity to maximise it. And there are probably 4 or 5 things that are no-brainers that for every dollar you get back, every dollar you spend, you would get at least 3 to 5 back on that spend. And that is Dulux Natural White, covered LED light fittings, steaming tiles, regrouting, refreshing sealant and mulch. Like they're just no-brainers, and adding styling, creating function. I've got quite a few people in my core area in Matcham and Holgate. So when I originally started this off at the very beginning of my career, I used to send a card for their anniversary with a scratchy because that was a system that someone had mentioned. And then I started thinking, why am I putting these in a letterbox? I could knock on the door. And I was doing these little Byron Bay cookie boxes. And then we started doing our Matcham honey.
I was wondering what they were.
Oh,
that's so lovely.
So whether I sold it to them or not, I door knocked them for their anniversary. Fortunately, a few too many people are getting gates these days. But as a result, these are people that are becoming clients. I'm becoming their agent before they need an agent. So I've got 2 or 3, it's more than that, at least half a dozen that are going to sell in the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months. And they were like, what do we need to do in this period of time? I've got one client that is putting in a wall because she has this junk space, which is actually bedroom 5/rumpus. Mm-hmm. So that's happening there. I've got another client that is doing a complete refurbishment and renovation. And every 4 weeks I go over and he's like, right, so we're here now. Where do we go from here? And like last week when I was there, I said, look, you're trying to make a decision that is going to be predetermined once your kitchen's in place, and then we look at how it connects from there. So with these clients, I'm not just helping them get their properties ready for market. I think the biggest spend I've had on one was about $300,000 to make the home actually habitable.
How fabulous that it's becoming such a lot more than selling a house.
Yeah, getting the listing and...
It's a journey. Yeah. Georgia and I have a document, a PDF and a hard copy, and it's called our Transformation Team, and it is literally 6 pages long of our contacts that we use. And I can go and list a property, and I can, before I'm back in the office within half an hour, I can have half a dozen trades organised to get over there and quote on what needs to be done to that property to get it market ready. And it is a big part of it. And sometimes I've seen people spend money that they really shouldn't have done, or they end up selling a house and they've done some improvement. And I say, what made you think of that? Why did you do that? Oh, like you could have just, I'd have been happy to talk through that with you. And they were like, I didn't know that was something that you did. If I've got a relationship with you, I mean, I'm community based and I'm community minded, and I'm not just here for the short haul, I'm here for the long haul. I love being with people. I love our community events, and I'm out there all the time. And I'd rather you say to me, Ingrid, I'm not selling now. I'm going to sell in 5 years, but I'm thinking of these improvements. Which things are worth my while? because I'd hate for someone to spend money
unnecessarily.
And carpet, unbelievable. I cannot tell you how many amazing carpets I have seen pulled up because they were not the right colour, look or texture, or the person wanted floorboards.
It's all pointing towards that real estate, it's not a transactional based business. It's a relationship based business, and we always liken buyers agents to being a little bit more consultative.
Yes.
But I think even the selling space is going that way. People are demanding more and looking for advice and looking for help, and I think it's good for the industry. I think it'll give the industry more credibility. We've always been pretty low on the trusted scale, real estate agents. So hopefully with all of this and what you're doing and people like yourselves and with buyers agents coming in as well who are more consultative, that it lifts the industry
absolutely
a little bit more, and people do feel like that they can go for advice, not just about having someone walk in and sell your house or buy you a house, negotiate a house for you.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to it.
It is definitely becoming considered more as a respected profession. So 10 years ago, getting a seller to come into the office for a meeting in business hours, it's like, hang on, I'm at work, whereas now it's more expected. You go to your doctor's office or you go to your accountant's office for a consultation, and they will now, come to the office. I mean, I do
Interesting.
Yeah,
it's very true. You think that I used to spend most of my nights when I was a selling agent going to people's homes, sitting in their lounge room for an hour or sometimes more, depending on how many questions, where it's, as you say, they come in at other times during business hours now. It's not so much the thing, or, especially when I started in real estate, we would also take them out to lunch or take them out to dinner. It was a social thing as well. And that doesn't so much happen these days. It's definitely a more professional environment.
It is more professional.
There's, that expectation that, we're going to help you, but you also have to help yourself and help us.
Yeah.
So, it's very much a reciprocated responsibility.
Do you think COVID changed any of that, or do you think it's just a natural progression in where the industry's going?
I think that has just become a natural progression, that there is more respect. There's less time wasting of buyers and prospective vendors now, I think, than there used to be when people used to get in 3 or 4 people when really they had no intention of using any of the others. They already were using one. It was just a research tool for them. I think that people do a bit more research online.
Yes, it's availability of information. We used to withhold information because it was a hook, all of that sort of thing.
We used to take people in the car. We used to take them around property after property on a Saturday or a Sunday.
Yeah.
For people looking at getting in, and I know we're sort of focusing on Matcham Valley because, I mean, that's where your, core area is. We get a lot of people calling us saying we'd like to buy an acreage and we have this much money. What's the entry level into Matcham Holgate these days, and what's, what can you expect to pay?
So your entry level is a couple of $1 million. And that will be something that has not got the best land or best location.
So for around $2 million, that's kind of what you're looking at?
That's your entry point with money to spend. Yeah. The average sale price isn't what it was 3 years ago. The highest sale price in Matcham is 5.75. One of my industry colleagues sold a property on Matcham Road last year, and that was an outstanding result for that property. And then the highest sale for Holgate was one that I did sell last year on Clyde Road, and that was 6.2 million.
Isn't that interesting? Holgate prices used to be
not as high as Matcham.
Matcham, but that's just
changing.
15 years ago, when, if it was $1 million in Matcham, it was $950 in Holgate.
100%.
It was a thing.
It was a thing.
It was a thing.
Yep.
There is no thing
There's
anymore.
no thing.
And I educate people. It's all about the location, the setting, the aspect, because if you are on a busy stretch of through road, yes, you're going to get road noise. And if you're low and bottom of a hill or heavily forested, you're not going to have a great aspect. And what I educate my buyers to do is you've got to consider each property in its own merits, because so often they're saying, oh, well, this road has got leeches, that road's got mosquitoes. And I'm like, well, actually, it's got nothing to do with the street address. It's all about the actual property. So about a couple of million is entry level. With the one we just sold this week, it had a Matcham address. I don't know if you know how well you know the Ridgeway, but the Ridgeway is in 5 suburbs. Lisero, Holgate, Matcham, Arimba, no, not Arimba, Tumby and Wombrel. Anyway, this property had a Matcham address, but it was very much a Tumby location.
Yeah.
The house was close to the road, but private, and had beautiful green setting. And so a young couple have bought that. They, to buy actually in Matcham itself, they probably would have been looking at another $500,000, if not more. But they're absolutely thrilled with that. And the people had been there for 38 years. They have loved that property. So that's probably your entry level, but you can still spend $3 million and still have updates to do,
renovations to do.
Yeah.
What are you seeing at the moment in the market, as far as stock and buyer activity and all those sorts of things? And where do you sort of see it going over the next few months to the end of the year? And is spring typical, do you think?
Yeah,
we're saying
spring is typical, and because it was really wet leading up into winter, there was, I know I've got a lot of properties that have been signed for some time and they've been delayed in coming on. So I know I've got a fair amount of stock coming on, a fair amount of properties.
That's good.
Yep. But then I'm sure other agents do as well. Talking to the photographers and things, they're busy. They're very busy. So I think, we always look to achieve a premium on the price. I usually tend to be conservative, and I'm very analytical, and I will look at rationally and logically look at surrounding sales and do, a most likely selling range. But then we will target a premium and see if the market will bear it, because we are not selling something with a recommended retail price or something that's in a, just a terrigal or error housing estate where the prices are within $50,000, where they're going to be, because acreages is so circumstantial. It depends on how well it suits the person and where they're coming from and what they see the value to be, how long a vendor can hold out for a certain price. So we will always look to achieve that and see where the market is positioning it.
There's not as many on the market either. No. It's not like they're on every, street corner.
No.
You might take you a long time to find the property that is right for you.
Absolutely.
There's a lot more boxes to
journey, far longer
It's a longer journey, but I have sold properties to people and it was the first one they saw. I always say to people with an acreage that no two are the same. And when you find the one that's yours, you grab it with both hands and don't let it go, because you won't see it again.
That's exactly right.
Timing plays a huge part of it.
Absolutely.
We've found with our acreage buyers, it's very much a timing thing. Because we get asked the $1 million question, how long is it going to take?
Yeah.
And, we actually can't answer that definitively because really, there's so many other factors. We just tell them, strap in, because it's not going to be 5 minutes.
No.
The more flexible they can be in location, obviously, the better. When you're looking for an acreage, obviously, they might have their number one sort of suburb. But, the more flexible, the better. Because if someone really wants that acreage lifestyle, some are quite flexible in where they'll be to get that.
Correct.
Obviously, budget-driven as well. We love the acreage space. Love it.
What's not to love?
Yeah, what's not to love? It was where I learnt real estate. I remember when we used to do caravan as sales agents, that with all the agents would go to the acreages and the resi agents would be like, I don't know how to price this. It was second nature to me because that's all I knew.
Yeah.
So I've
took it a
always
step
loved
further
it.
And I went out regional New South Wales.
Oh, you did too? I did a little stint in Bathurst.
Yeah, well, for a few years. So not only acreage but farms. And that was another
whole nother level.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I learnt so much, and just the differences in the property and all of the considerations, and it was really interesting. I actually found that more interesting than the town.
Oh, absolutely.
And the period homes were interesting too, but I just found the acreage properties and the farms were just so much more interesting and detailed, and you spent more time out there, and the relationship was longer.
Know them better, I feel.
The relationship's far longer.
Yeah.
And and to particularly country folk, it's like, come and have a cup of tea. It almost at times felt like we weren't in a professional relationship because it was just so warm and friendly and very family oriented.
I've recently remarried, and so starting off with new friendship groups and things like that. And so many of our close friends are people that I've either showed houses to or sold houses to.
Yeah.
So it's not going out for dinner with clients. We go out after and we become friends. And
nice,
and the people are amazing. You know, they've come onto these sorts of properties because they tend to be just a bit more down to earth or genuine, and just in terms of, not saying residential isn't a genuine way of life, but it's just a different lifestyle where people want to just be a bit more in touch with the basics.
Yeah.
Still want it to be all beautiful and luxurious, but just really appreciate that outdoor space.
No, I think everything you've shared about the Acreage property is really beneficial, because we get asked a lot of questions about it, and I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Here we go. So you've obviously been in Matcham Holgate for a really long time now.
Yep.
Do you still, and I remember this used to happen a lot, and I wasn't in there nearly as long as you, but do you still come across a property that you just are blown away by, that you had no idea that was there? You go up a road, around a corner, and here you are at a property that you did not know about in the time that you've been in the valley? Because there's so many little hidden gems. Does it still happen to you?
Sort of. Sometimes, because I door knock everybody where there are records, unless they've got a gate, I've pretty much been to probably over 600 of the 750. Yep. If there's gates and if they're pre-records, no, I haven't been there. But yes, it does still happen.
Every now and again, we used to just get blown away by, oh my gosh.
Or
I
you
did not know this was here.
Yeah. So no, not the roads.
Not so much the road, but the property.
Or what's on the other side of the gate, or on the other side, or even what's in their homes and improvements. Like I have seen a property when I did their anniversary a couple of years ago, and what they spent on their media room, you could build a project home for.
Yeah.
I have seen the most amazing collections of cars. I mean, Stephen Gittoes says it's real estate's not rocket science, but you're meeting all these people. So it's meeting people and understanding things, like, and learning about what they've done and what they've created, like some of the most incredible gardens that you've ever seen, and sculptures, and artworks, and just the architecture of their homes. Just things that have been custom made for those properties is really, really special. The different landscaping ideas, just all those different sorts of things. So it's not necessarily discovering the new space, it's what's within the space when you get to go beyond the gate or the front door.
Well, what a fabulous way to wrap up our podcast. You can see how passionate you are about it, and you've shared some amazing information, not only about how we will work together as real estate professionals, but on acreage properties, which I think some people are, they don't really know a lot about. So it's been really fabulous to have you, Ingrid, on our podcast. I appreciate your time, and thank you for the honey.
Oh, no
problem.
Can't wait. It's the best.
Well, it's beautiful. I love the name too.
They've been around now for quite a while. And when I first started doing it,
beautiful touch.
Yeah, well, the thing is, when I first started doing it, so many people didn't know it existed, and their business just grew exponentially from that organic spreading.
There you go. That's so lovely. No, it's beautiful. Thank you, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Unreal Estate. If there is someone that you think would benefit from the information that we've shared today, please feel free to share this episode or leave us a comment. We'd really love to hear your feedback. We release a new episode every 2 weeks, so to stay up to date, hit follow or subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.